Hello, Sam.
Hey, Ron.
I understand that you are a philosophy professor at the University of Purdue, but you also volunteered to work with prisoners in a nearby prison.
Yeah.
Can you share with us an experience with one of those prisoners?
Sure. It was a unique experience. Let me just start off saying that not many people can have. And I became a Illinois approved volunteer. And I was allowed to go into this detention center, not just to visit where they meet their attorneys, but I was allowed to go into the prison itself, into the pods. And one particular experience that I had was with a young lady who I call S. S, who I was asked to talk to, was profoundly unhappy. And she was constantly fighting with the other inmates, and she was constantly fighting with the correctional officers. Now, fighting, I mean arguing, not cooperating. Two things immediately came forward that she had problems with, and I, of course, did not put these words into her mouth. She had problems with being told what to do. Mm-hmm. She couldn't stand that.
That's natural, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Or
yeah.
was it especially strong with her?
It was, I think it's natural for anyone, but it's a particularly, it's a particular issue with not just her, but with other inmates that I spoke with, was they didn't like being told what to do.
Right.
And they didn't like the fact that they couldn't control their own lives. These were two common issues that kept coming up. Mm-hmm. And they insisted, first of all, on having their way. And I spoke to them, particularly S, about this issue. Why did she need to have her own way? Mm-hmm. Why did she need to have control? Again, this is related, but later on in our conversations, it came out why. My job at the time was to get her to understand that she could not control the things, but that was okay. That there is a certain amount of control that we all want, but then we have to sort of understand that if we're put into situations, and I drew this back to Epictetus, and I brought Epictetus out about what kind of, when you start thinking about your own life, what are the things that you can control right now, and what are the things you cannot control?
Did you mention to her the Stoics or Epictetus? Or
mm-hmm. I sure did, yeah.
What was her reaction to that?
Well, she'd never heard of them. And I brought up other issues that are philosophically related, and I didn't typically mention names. Right. I brought up respect because she desperately wanted respect, and I think this was motivating a lot of the control issues and a lot of her needs to have things in her own control. Was, if you don't give these things to me, you don't respect me.
Okay.
And so we talked a lot about, eventually we started talking about the philosophical notion of respect, and I brought in Kant. And typically, this was a common conversation. It was to bring up the second categorical imperative about treating, not just expecting respect for yourself, which I think they all had a healthy attitude, but also showing it, and that there were ways of showing it that were not inconsistent with your own sense of control, with your own needs and your own sense of respect, that people deserve to be treated with respect, even in situations like this, even if they're a correctional officer. The fact is that when what we tried to do was we tried to work out a way for her to understand the kinds of issues that would come up with the correctional officers as well as with the other inmates. What do you do when they want you to do something and you don't want to do it? How do you show respect, and how can you navigate through these kinds of issues. In fact, the program I was developing was called Navigations. And they seemed to understand this, how to navigate, right? So the issue of control and demanding to get what you want were foremost on their minds. And it was all related to the notion of respect.
Can you share with us a bit what kind of insights did she have about herself and respect? You mentioned control. And what about respect? Did she realize that a certain behavior is or is not connected to respect? Did she learn something about respect?
In fact, she did. As we began to talk about the concept of respect and why we should respect one another, right? That was an issue that she hadn't grasped yet. And I brought up Kant's notion of unconditional or unconditional value. And I said, you understand that you have value and that it's unconditional, and you want, and because of that value, you want respect. But did you realize that other people have the same kind of value and that you have an obligation, to respect them as well? This wasn't earth-shattering, but it was something that she wasn't conversant about. She had grown up in a situation where self-preservation was really paramount, and she didn't have time to think about what other people deserve. She was more about herself.
So in a way, by talking about respect and about respect not being just my own respect, but the respect of others too, you touched, in a way, it sounds to me, also the issue of mutuality.
That's right. And I brought in, the notions that I was trying to get her to sort of understand what she was doing, how she was treating other people, treating them like objects. I didn't talk about Martin Buber, but I brought in the I thou, the I it sort of relationship. I tried to use metaphors that she would be familiar with. What does it mean to treat someone like an object? Okay. What does it mean to objectify or to call, or to think of someone as an it instead of as someone who deserves respect? Right. She refused to play cards with the other ladies, even though they asked her. And as she began to, I challenged her several times. I said, really, if you do see that it's wrong to try to control other people in this way that's very disrespectful, why don't I challenge you to hang out with them. I challenge you to interact with them. And at the time, I didn't realize the profound effect that would have on her. She began to start thinking about other people, and she started leaving the self-preservation mode, and she began to become more empathetic with the other people. And she began to realize that while she had problems and she made bad choices, there were other people in there that were in worse off shape than she was and made worse decisions and were facing longer sentences for much worse crimes. Right. And she began to, I think for the first time, appreciate that.
That the story is not only self-preservation, but there is also a give and take in relationship with others, mutuality.
Yeah, right. It was a sort of an awakening for her, something that she'd never thought about. I was profoundly challenged. I was changed myself when I began to see how important the notion of respect and the reasons for why we should respect one another, and the empathy that comes with it, how that could profoundly change someone's life. I talk with my students about this all the time, but they're not nearly that, it's almost an academic enterprise, exercise for them. But for us, as well as the other inmates, this was a life-changing conversation. They were changing. They began to see themselves, not just these isolated atoms, but people who are related to other people and that, part of their happiness could be, related to the way they interact in a respectful way with other people. Did
the prisoners, the guards, did they notice a change of the?
In fact, I remember coming in one day. I was going to meet with S, and I made my way back into the pods, and the guards who were sitting outside the pods where she was housed asked me. They said, "What have you done with her?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "She's really, really changed." And I go, "Really? What?" She goes, "Well, she's interacting with the other ladies. She's getting along with them. She stopped fighting, and she's also stopped fighting with us. She still has some issues, but she's really changed." And I was very happy. I was very proud of her. And they said, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, nothing really. She's doing all the hard work. The credit should be given to her. I just introduced her to some concepts. I got her to start thinking about reflecting about her life and the goals. And in fact, she began to see herself as somebody who could make a difference in the world." Mm-hmm. And she started talking about wanting to become a nurse, and that she was going to go and finish her high school education, and that she was going to try to get in college. When I started talking to her, she had no sort of sense of herself as being someone who could do something like that. And now, and how, Ron, I don't know how this is all related, to be honest with you, right? I just introduced some concepts. It opened up her mind, this self-reflection, and she started changing.
I see that this is very emotional for you too. Yeah.
It was their lives that touched me. They made bad choices, and they got caught, and they were being punished, and they were struggling, and they're not so unrelated to me. Yeah. Before I thought, these individuals are unlike me. I have nothing in common with them, which, from an educational point of view, of course, there was, a big difference. Yeah. But in terms of what they wanted in life, there's no difference. Yeah. They wanted love. They wanted
to be happy. Yeah. To be respected.
To be respected. To be, in some cases, a good mother. S very much wanted to be a good mother. Mm-hmm. And she talked a lot about her son. And she had the same sort of goals and projects in mind that I do. Yeah. As well. And I felt privileged to be connected to her and to get to know her. Yeah. And after she left the detention center, we corresponded. Okay. She was in a federal prison, and she had access to email, and we communicated off and on for about 5 years. Wow. And she talked in these emails about how she was still, practicing the sorts of things, the self-reflection that mm-hmm. we had started in the detention center. So,
well, that's an amazing story, Sam, and thank you very much for sharing it with us.
You're quite welcome.